Hey, this is Dr. Robert Frankel. Welcome to the Modern Man Podcast. Welcome to 2025. It's exciting new year, exciting new podcast programming. We are talking a lot this year about what we call the Longevity Project. It is going to be how we, elongate our life, have a better quality of life, just are more healthy, and how we're going to get into this new year at our tip-top shape and really going to be at our highest functioning. And so we're going to talk a lot about things that are going to help us get there, including peptides, hormones, all different types of things, where we can reach our highest goals, where we can reach our highest potential. So I'm excited. It's really exciting to be a part of this, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. And our first podcast this year is going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, hopefully yours too, and it's NAD. NAD is a peptide. It's actually a coenzyme peptide that is pretty much functioning throughout our entire body. In every cell in our body, we have NAD. And for any of you who don't want to revisit high school biochemistry or biology, we're going to take you back just a little bit because it's going to give you a little bit more context on what exactly NAD is, how it works, why it's important, why it really kind of is really going to be life-changing for some of you. And we're excited. So welcome again to the Modern Man Podcast. Welcome to 2025. And here we go. So NAD, like I said, is a peptide. It is literally functions in almost pretty much every cell in our body. So it really is ubiquitous throughout our entire body. And what we do know about it is that as we get a little older, essentially every 20 years, the level of NAD that is in our body actually decreases by 50%. So that's a significant amount. If you know anything or remember anything about high school biology or college biology, wherever you learned it, or if you went to medical school, or who knows, maybe you just read about it on, like muscle physiology, you understand that the thing called the Krebs cycle, the citric acid cycle, these is essentially cellular respiration. And so every cell in our body has to go through this to keep its functioning at its peak. And once cellular respiration stops working, then the cells could potentially not divide, die. There's a lot of different things that, can cause this. With aging, we know that a lot of what aging has to do with our cells not being at their peak functionality and not being able to repair themselves. And this is a lot of what the problem is with aging when we talk about skin, when we talk about energy, when we talk about our ability to recover from, any of these types of things. It all has to do with how our bodies are going to respond. And if our bodies are not at their highest level, well, then you're going to get this issue. So NAD, of course, is the coenzyme that literally is matched up with the cellular respiration cycle, meaning that this cycle essentially is how our metabolism is going to run for each one of our cells. So for any of you who've worked out, which I hope lots of you on the Modern Man Podcast do, you realize that when you really work out hard, you've gone through that class, you're lifting lots of weights, you're doing significant aerobic respiration, aerobic exercise, you get that burn in your system. And you all have felt this at some point, regardless. Maybe it was just shoveling snow. Whatever it might be, you feel that burn, like that feeling. And what that is that's the production of lactic acid. So lactic acid is the byproduct of anaerobic respiration. What that means is that when our bodies no longer can do cellular respiration because we have used all the oxygen in our system, in our muscles, our bodies go on a much different trend, which goes through what's called anaerobic respiration. And this means that it's lack of oxygen. This is much less efficient. It causes, this lactic acid, which is kind of damaging, and you're not going to get the same energy production. When you go through, for instance, and, again, this is for all of us. I mean, all of us can understand this. The energy currency of the cell is what we call ATP. When you go through full cellular respiration, we produce approximately 36 to 38 ATPs, which means that we have the full NAD, we have the full oxygen. It's great. So we put all this energy into producing more energy, and we produce 38 of these currencies. Like, pretend like they're dollars. So you put in a few dollars, $2 to be exact, and you get back a total of 38. So it's a good net use of energy. But with lack of oxygen, what ends up happening is we'll usually put in 2 units of energy to produce 4, which means that we're only really producing 2 units of energy, or ATPs. And so obviously the amount of effort or energy that we're putting in is we're not getting the same return. And so our energy levels kind of diminish as we can't do this cellular respiration as efficiently as we used to. And why can't we do that? Well, I mean, if you're working out really hard, it's possible, but it's also possible that the cofactors that are part of cellular respiration are not present either. And so if it's not that we worked out really hard, but the more likelihood is that we have exhausted all our coenzymes, specifically NAD, you're going to reduce your amount of energy that's actually present. And so this is one of the major things that depletion of NAD does for our bodies. What it does is it actually limits our energy, limits our ability to function the same way. Lots of my patients talk about that, for whatever reason, when they were, younger, that they were able to, play all day, even play with their young kids. And now it's kind of like getting off the couch is as big of a task as doing any other like serious aerobic and that is kind of like the natural progression of us losing energy. Now, there obviously are lots of different reasons why this occurs, but for sure, one of the reasons is our inability to do respiration, and metabolism properly. And so this is step one. So energy has a lot to do with our bodies and NAD. And of course, depleting NAD is going to help us not reach our goals of having pristine, levels of energy. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the mitochondria. Obviously, for those, again, remembering high school biology, is kind of like the powerhouse of the cell. It's kind of how everything and how energy kind of boosts up. And when we exercise, we're able to produce more mitochondria in our cells, actually. So we actually produce more mitochondria to help us have more energy production. But the opposite can be true as well. If the mitochondria are dysfunctioning, not functioning properly, you're going to start producing less mitochondria, less energy, and you're going to end up having a decrease in mitochondria function, almost what we call dysfunction of mitochondria. So when this occurs, what happens is that our cells start to fatigue quicker, and we're not able to do the correct type of cellular metabolism. Our bodies start to crave sugar because the next step from like full respiration is something called glycolysis. A big name basically means we're using sugar to produce energy. And so what happens is a lot of times is that as we get a little older, our bodies are no longer able to produce enough energy through our most efficient form, which is cellular respiration, through the Krebs cycle. So we start using different ways to do this. And one of the ways is glycolysis. Glycolysis is the breakdown of sugar. Some cells actually use glycolysis almost exclusively. Those cells would be brain cells. And so that's why, like, when you are, having a hard day where you're just kind of like using a lot of brain energy, working at work or whatever it is, like eating a little bit of sugar actually does kind of give you that kind of like brain energy that you actually need. It's a factual thing. Like when we run out of sugar, we're going to need that sugar for certain cells in our brain cells. However, we don't want this to be vast through our whole body where we're using sugar for the most part as our help of energy. The reason is because when you do that, you're eating foods that are less nutritious. So, weight gain does occur. And the other thing is that it's less efficient. And so you're still not producing a good amount of energy with glycolysis. It's a much lower production of energy than full cellular respiration, but it does produce some energy. But this is part of the problem, is that fact that, weight gain with age a lot of times has to do with what our bodies need and crave to actually keep our energy levels up. And so because of the fact that we're losing NAD, we're unable to do this efficient amount of breakdown, then we start to produce these alternative pathways to actually produce energy. And those alternative pathways a lot of times are not the best pathways that we can reach out. So those are two of the most important things that we talk about when it comes to how energy is produced, and why, as we get a little older, we become more fatigued quickly, why we gain weight because of the fact that our bodies are using the wrong type of energy because it just can't use that same type of energy that we had in the past. Now, we're going to talk about another whole different topic, but still related to NAD. So your DNA, how it works essentially is DNA is our genetic blueprint of our cells. So everything is kind of produced or directed by a DNA. And so DNA has to replicate and has to continue to be transcribed or read so that way it could tell our bodies what it needs to do. And so the way that it does that, it continually divides, and then it will kind of reunite with other cells. And so division of cells are really important for kind of health and longevity because of the fact that we want our bodies to continually kind of turn over cells, obviously in an efficient way, not in an inefficient way. When cells are dividing too quickly, inefficiently, that is the impetus to like cancer cells. So we obviously don't want that, but we do want our cells to divide properly, because when DNA becomes damaged, then that's when you have things like skin inelasticity, meaning like you lose the elasticity of your skin, you develop fine lines and wrinkles, and as well as, cells that are the DNA, when it becomes too, damaged, it can produce things like cancer cells. And so obviously this is something that we really want to avoid, the DNA damage. Now, next topic I'm going to talk about, and a lot of these topics I'm going to go in briefly today. We can go into them deeper, in the future podcasts. But I just want to give you an overview of kind of like all the parts of NAD that are present. So there are these proteins called telomeres. So telomeres are basically the caps that sit over the DNA. And so if you look up, information about this, telomeres, when they are elongated, are protective of the DNA, which is a good thing because of the fact that you want to have your DNA, absolutely protected. So when it replicates, it's going to have its, best kind of functionality. You're not going to have abnormal cells growing from your DNA, but also you want it to be able to repair, because a lot of times what aging has to do with is your inability to repair your DNA. And we talk a lot about this in aesthetic medicine because of the fact that we do things like use PRP, which helps to kind of introduce stem cells, which helps to repair DNA, exosomes, which is another kind of type of stem cells, that are present in a placenta, which also helps to repair damaged DNA. But if we can avoid damage to DNA in the first place, then a lot of these things would be less necessary. So the telomeres, when they become short, they are more prone to the DNA becoming damaged. Now, what is one thing that helps to elongate these telomeres that are going to help protect your DNA and ultimately protect your functionality, your skin, your overall health? And NAD is one of the things that is absolutely vital to having long telomeres. It's been shown in many studies that the telomere size are directly related to if the telomere size is elongated, it's going to cause protection of the DNA, less chance of damage, and easy repair. Whereas if the telomeres are shorter, then you're going to end up having a lot less ability to do this. So DNA protection, which is vital to your overall kind of cells, if you just take a look at it in your skin itself, for instance, a lot of the damage that we have that causes lines, wrinkles, things like that have to do with your inability to repair DNA. So this is kind of vital to that in general, as well as these cells that are produced a lot of times will also produce inflammation, and obviously inflammatory things are really going to be ultimate. So going a little deeper into why DNA is so vital, there is something that happens as we age and the DNA becomes damaged. What can happen is the cells themselves can become what we call almost zombie cells, senescent cells, meaning that these cells can no longer divide. So they become actually zombies. They're there, they're present, they're in the entire matrix of your body, but they are not functioning the way that they're supposed to. And this happens because of the fact that the DNA is damaged beyond repair, can no longer be present, and it causes these senescent or zombie cells. Zombie cells are really interesting because of the fact that they have a lot of negative effects on your overall body. So what do the zombie cells do? They're senescent cells, they're zombie cells, they're cells that can no longer divide. They're just sitting in your body, and what do they produce? Well, one of the biggest things that these zombie cells do is they cause havoc on your overall matrix of your body. They produce lots of inflammation. And obviously, we talked a lot about inflammation in the past, but obviously with inflammation, the things that are going to be most problematic is that they are going to increase the risk of developing heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, and even tumors. So these cells are producing lots of inflammation in your body, plus, of course, autoimmune diseases, just, having difficulty with wound healing, with difficulty with your immune system. Inflammation in your body, as many of us know, is one of the most problematic and damaging things that your body can handle. So producing these cells that no longer divide, these zombie cells, are really damaging to us. And they happen because of the fact that NAD is not producing these long telomeres. So they're causing damage to the DNA. When the DNA becomes damaged beyond all repair, either the cell's going to die, which sometimes will happen, which is, also a serious problem with aging. But even more problematic is the production of these syncytin or non-dividing cells, which we call zombie cells. And so these zombie cells are going to produce these, inflammation, which is also going to, increase the risk of all these different diseases. But also, these zombie cells will impair the functioning of other cells. So you basically think about it this way: when you have a big population of people, and within those people you have a group of people that are just not, that are all trying to, work on building a building or something. And then there's a group of people who are just sitting there distracting you, kind of not doing their work, kind of making everybody else a little less efficient. And this is what exactly happens with these syncytin or zombie cells, that they're present and they impair your ability to repair yourself, to even divide properly, because they're taking up the space that the bodies can't, kind of become more efficient. And so it's really damaging to have these cells, present. And with the replenishment of NAD, what they will do is that you will have the ability to divide properly, have DNA repair, and not have these cells that are present that are dividing into that. So it's a pretty interesting kind of story, and NAD is vital to this. Another important protein, or gene as some people call it, are these proteins called sirtuins. So a sirtuin essentially is also dependent upon NAD. Now, what's really interesting about these sirtuins is that there's been studies that have shown that yeast, worms, mice, other animals, they put the amount of sirtuins that are present in these different, they've looked at their longevity. And in almost all cases, the research has shown that because of the fact that you're using these sirtuins at the highest level in all these animals, they are going to increase their longevity, their length of, like how long they're living, essentially. Their life expectancies increases in all these animal studies. So, and it's pretty much vast. I mean, they did studies initially in yeast, and then they went to worms, nematodes, they went into mice, and, obviously they're moving into the human trials to look at what are the effect of sirtuins on the body. And so the more NAD you have present in your body, the more sirtuins that are present. And so thus, this is directly linked to your longevity or your life expectancy. Now, what do these sirtuins do? I mean, basically, they've shown that the few things that actually kind of boost the production of these sirtuins, their effectiveness and their efficiency. The one thing that they talk a lot about is calorie restriction. If you have calorie restriction, it actually increases the functionality of these sirtuins. So we talk a lot about diet, and keeping weight down, and, using the amount of calories that we have to be high quality calories with the, least amount of calories present. I mean, I strongly believe in calorie restriction. I believe in the fact that as long as we're putting high quality foods in our body, we're going to improve. And this study shows that calorie restriction itself actually increases the sirtuins. Now, what else increases sirtuins? NAD definitely is another cofactor to these sirtuins. The less NAD you have present, the less sirtuins that are actually functionality. That has been shown in multiple studies that the less NAD that's present, the less ability that these sirtuins can actually function. There are actually some other things as well. Curcumin is another food product that has been shown actually to increase the production of sirtuins, which again, we look directly on how these sirtuins have been laid out. You increase the sirtuins, you're going to increase longevity, increase your life expectancy right off the bat. It's been shown on these animal studies, and so it's definitely present. And the fourth thing is resveratrol. Resveratrol is commonly found in a red wine, but it is just a protein. So if you drink the amount of glasses of red wine that you really need, it would counteract the effects because of the sugar, because of the alcohol. You need about 50 glasses of red wine to produce what really is the most efficient, effective way of this protein to help increase the sirtuins. So I'm not advocating for you to drink 50 glasses of red wine a night, but I am advocating for you to supplement with resveratrol and to really kind of use that as an increase the production. So these four things: calorie restriction, NAD, curcumin, and resveratrol are all things that increase the functionality of sirtuins. And as we talked about already, sirtuins are directly linked to life expectancy and longevity. So this is pretty exciting research. It's pretty exciting things that we're seeing. So Alzheimer's disease is a neurological that affects, obviously, memory, cognitive function. It affects a lot of patients. Now, what are the things about Alzheimer's disease that we notice? The first thing is that if there is DNA damage to cells, neurological cells, they have a very difficult time to repair themselves as it is. Neurological cells often don't divide very quickly or at all. So any damage to DNA molecules or cells that are in the neurological system are definitely problematic. And so again, what we talked about earlier with the telomeres, as far as the shorter telomeres are going to increase the concern for producing cell damage, DNA damage. And so, by adding NAD, you're elongating your telomeres, decreasing your DNA damage, and obviously decreasing the risk of Alzheimer's. Now, the other thing that's very interesting, there is been shown studies that the other thing that actually causes Alzheimer's is a protein called beta amyloid. So beta amyloid is these proteins that develop in neurological cells that help to kind of advance the production of patients who have Alzheimer's disease. So this is not a good thing. We don't want these cells. So we have found that in multiple studies that patients who have taken or have been deficient in NAD and that was given NAD has actually decreased the production of these beta amyloid proteins. Groundbreaking, incredible, research. So obviously the DNA damage is one thing that NAD is significantly linked to decrease the DNA damage, which is, of course, a part of why these neurological cells get damaged and Alzheimer's can grow. But also, if you increase the amount of NAD, it has an inverse effect on beta amyloid protein production. So another incredibly groundbreaking information that's present. We're pretty excited about it. So essentially, when you kind of take in conclusion, what is the functionality, or what is NAD really going to do for me? It has four major things that I like to look at. One, it's going to increase your energy. So because of the fact that it's affecting your production of ATP, the cellular currency of the cell. Two, it's going to essentially decrease your inflammation, and it's going to decrease the production of these zombie cells, which can produce heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, and Alzheimer's disease. 3, it's going to increase your longevity because it's going to turn on those special cells called sirtuins. And when it does that, it's going to help increase longevity. We've seen that in multiple animal studies. And 4, it's going to decrease your risk of neurocognitive diseases like Alzheimer's disease by decreasing your production of beta amyloid proteins, but also decreasing your chance of having damaged or defective DNA that shows up in your neurological system. So with all these things, am I an advocate for NAD? Well, absolutely. But how do you get it? What ability can we absorb it? Now, there is direct way orally to take NAD. The molecule is too large. You cannot really get the production of NAD. Now, there are some supplements that help are the precursors to NAD that has some effectiveness, but truly the best way to get it is either intravenous or intramuscular. The biggest issue with the intravenous is that you're putting a large amount of or large molecule protein through your veins. So what you have to do it safely is to do it over 8 to 12 hours. Now, there are people who do it quicker, and I have some issues with that because of the fact that I do think that there's a possibility that you could damage your veins. And endothelial damage can cause, clots producing, cause damage to the vessels that can cause heart attacks, strokes, things like that. So if you're going to do it, make sure that the people that are doing it for you are going to do it over a long period of time. My recommendation is that if it's not done over an 8 to 12 hour period, then you have to be really cautious with the fact that you're getting it too quickly, and it could potentially damage some of the vessels. Intramuscular is another really good kind of measure way to do it as well. You have to do it more often than intravenously, but you don't have the same kind of time constraints as doing it intravenously, meaning like you don't have to do it over 8 to 12 hours. You can do it, over a period of weeks, whereas, IV NAD usually lasts you for about a month, but you have to, do it correctly where you're doing it over 8 to 12 hours, where, with NAD, we recommend doing it twice a week, and, the bioavailability will be equivalent over that month period of time by doing it over that. It's just you're going to have to be doing it weekly, bi-weekly to get the same bioavailability than you would through the IV. So either way, no matter how you do it, it's super important for our overall kind of health, longevity, energy, and we're looking forward to talking more about NAD and lots of other peptides this year. So I appreciate your listenership. Thank you for joining me today on the Modern Man podcast. And we are going to be having new guests. We're going to be talking about lots of new things, always cutting edge here on the Modern Man podcast, like things that you want to know about because you hear about it in, the news, and we want to know. So thank you again for joining me today at the Modern Man podcast, and we'll see you soon.